your new book that's We the Poisoned, about the poisoning of Flint, Michigan. And tell us about how you decided to even follow this story. And then just tell us some of the most shocking, infuriating things about this cover-up.
It's like a never-ending onion that just when you think you've kind of peeled it all, there's more. I was on the campaign trail in 2016, and I was at the People's Summit in 2016, for those of you veterans who remember the good old days. And a Flint resident came up to me. I kind of knew what happened just from the news. I was naive like a lot of people, and I figured, well, I'm assuming they're fixing this. She came up to me in a Flint Lives Matter shirt. She told me that it's a disaster, that the media has abandoned them, that people are starting to get really, really sick, and asked me to come. And it was pretty immediate. I mean, I was there for like an hour, and I was like, this is like an episode of The Walking Dead. I was just meeting kids with rashes, meeting adults who were losing their hair, walking into homes with like everything was broke. The dishwasher was broken. The sinks were broken. Anything with water, laundry machines were broken. I just couldn't believe that the media wasn't covering it anymore. And I went back to the hotel that I was staying at, and like it was the 2016 race, and they were covering something crazy Trump tweeted. And that's kind of what like radicalized me a little bit, because there's such an alternative reality between what is actually happening on the ground in places in America and what the corporate media covers. So I just kind of started going there. Every trip I took over the last 8 years, I started building more sources. Those sources started dumping like a whole vault of corruption. The media had described this as some just tragic mistake because government officials were trying to cut corners and save money. No, I learned very quickly this was actually a for-profit privatization scheme. It's not just going on in Flint. It's happening everywhere. It's not just happening with water. It happens with a lot of utilities and public assets that are now being sold to private companies, predominantly water. This is actually an example of democracy being removed, but you never hear this from Democrats ranting about democracy now. The governor of Michigan, who is a Republican, declared a financial emergency in Flint, and he just appointed unelected czars to run the city. The first order of business was, let's try and switch Flint to a brand new water system. Flint had gotten its water from Detroit, no problem, for 50 years. Detroit was price gouging them. So that was kind of the narrative from local officials, from the Republican governor and his people. Let's create our own water system so we could set our own rates. Okay. Well, they said that new water system, we're going to build it along the same exact path as the existing water pipeline that went from Detroit to Flint. Unheard of in engineering terms, to build like a duplicate pipeline. Well, you need a lot of raw water for fracking. You need a lot of raw water for farming, agriculture. Most of the water was not even going to be used for Flint residents. It was going to be used for business. So basically what happened is Flint was broke. It had no credit rating. It wasn't legally allowed to borrow more money for anything, much less to build a completely unnecessary new water system. So Wall Street banks, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, along with local officials in Flint and these unelected czars, kind of came up with this cockamamie scheme. Well, let's just create an emergency so Flint would have an exception to borrow $100 million for this new water system. And hey, while we're building this new water system, let's use the Flint River, which General Motors, DuPont, Dow Chemical, every corporation you could think of have been dumping their shit in for 100 years. And while we're at it, let's use the Flint water plant, which I would compare to these Boeing planes that are falling apart mid-air, or they're adding the parts mid-flight. The Flint water plant, as I show in my book, didn't even have the equipment to add the proper chemicals. The media always says, oh, they didn't add the proper corrosion control chemicals. They didn't have the equipment in the plant to do that. They were moving people from the garbage department to the water department 2 weeks before the water switch. So the bottom line is it was all a rush. And, to hell with these people. No, I don't think anybody thought they were actively going to poison them. Legally, they were supposed to test the water for a year before sending it out. They didn't do that. So the book
certainly
reveals
didn't care very much if they were going to poison them.
No. And what I've tried to, because, water is not sexy, right? It doesn't get ratings. I think it's pretty sexy because it's like the number one thing you need to stay alive. So I think that's kind of important. And as I exposed in the book, I mean, the governor had, think of the Sopranos and Tony's consigliere. The governor's consigliere, his right-hand man, was going around Flint offering sick residents payoffs. to shut up. The governor and his top people destroyed their phones right before the launch of the Flint criminal investigation. Can you imagine for a second the MSNBC meltdown? If there was evidence that Donald Trump, his health secretary, the CDC, that they just erased their phones and all of their messages for the months before COVID spread throughout the world.
Be the end of democracy.
Literally, I had Mother Jones asking me, is there a Trump angle? I said, no, this happened under Obama. You want me to make one up? Political payoffs, destruction of evidence, witness tampering, residents, like the top activists, like think like an Erin Brockovich back in the day. The Erin Brockovich of Flint had her brakes cut and she almost died. I have evidence that the governor of Michigan knew about the deadly Legionnaires outbreak. He knew about it for 16 months. And instead of notifying the public and saving lives, he buried it. Witness tampering, political payoffs, threats and surveillance of residents. This is a bipartisan affair. So for those of you who are going to be like, but what about Obama? What about the Democrats? Democrats are in on this too. So I reveal in the book that, Gretchen Whitmer, who, when the media was trying to push out Biden, a lot of people were pushing for her to replace Biden on the ticket. She's totally screwed Flint. The Democratic Attorney General of Michigan, Dana Nessel, who is beloved on MSNBC, she pretty much tanked the Flint criminal investigation. Some people think intentionally to protect the banks that were involved with the cover-up. I can't get in her head, but she made decisions that make no sense. And lawyers have said she obstructed the investigation from the start. She fired prosecutors that were going after the Republican governor for involuntary manslaughter, which would have been a first in American history. She fired them. She dropped charges. Her predecessors, they were building a case for racketeering, which is RICO. That was created in the 70s to go after the mob figures. Mm-hmm. They were like very close to charging that. She fired them and never followed through. And right now, like why I say this is still going on, it's an active cover-up of the Michigan Supreme Court threw out the criminal charges that were brought by the Democratic Attorney General. They ruled in a 6-0 decision. So it wasn't just Republican judges, it was liberal judges too. They had been refusing to hand over documents about that RICO investigation to me, claiming there was an active investigation. So once the investigation was over, I put in more freedom of information requests. Then they said, we don't have the documents. There were receipts showing that they had the documents. So then I publicly threatened to sue them. And magically, they got back to me unprompted saying, we'll look again. Then they found the documents, but they won't give them to me. And I believe they won't give them to me because they expose JP Morgan and Wells Fargo's role in this. So it's been an uphill climb to get people to realize, A, this is not like crisis in the past tense. I did a book event in Flint. Literally, residents are coming up to me online to get signatures showing me rashes they still have on their arm from the water. Residents are still posting brown water they're getting. 10 years later, cancer is through the roof in Flint. Some cancers are up 300% compared to before the water switch. And that's kind of been my uphill climb to get people to care about this. It's not particularly easy to promote or sell a book in the middle of an election, but that's how the cookie crumbled. I've actually had conservatives reach out to me that read this, like outraged. I have reported on Texas ranches interviewing like AR-15 wielding like rock rib Republicans, and they are fighting their city because their water is contaminated and the city's corrupt and doing nothing. And most people that are not crazy don't think anyone should be poisoned and don't think the government should be trying to make a quick buck over water. So I hope people get the book because A, it's important, but B, if you don't know what they did in Flint, you will not have the playbook for your community because whether it's water, whether it's air pollution, soil, fracking, mining, so many industrial, environmental, what I believe is environmental genocide going on in America.
Well, I actually want to ask you about the issue of water privatization. I'm going to quote your book. You write, in 2020, water began being traded as a commodity on Wall Street, just like gold and oil. From hedge fund titans to local governments, water stocks are being bought up as a financial bet that there will be a shortage in the near future. Besides the moral depravity of corporate vultures and governments turning a basic human right into just another trade-for-profit asset, I can't say their predictions are wrong. Between record global droughts and epidemic of contaminated water across the country and world, and the climate catastrophe already destroying countries and communities, the future of clean and available water is not certain. In fact, 2/3 of the world's population will face water shortages by 2025. So, can you talk more about this and what is happening regarding these laws now and the impact of these companies going in and buying up water rights? Because that's terrifying.
Yeah. I mean, we go back to privatization. So in the Northeast, for example, where we are, American Water, which is a private water company, they've taken over New Jersey's water for the most part, a lot of New York's water, other states' water. And if you're a private company rather than a public utility, there's less regulations you have to follow. There's less testing you have to do. Wall Street hedge funders, traders in 2020 started buying up water, treating it as a commodity. Because what if war's been fought over? At least Trump was honest. Steal the oil if you're going to go to war. It's been oil. Well, a lot of people believe whether it's a shortage or regional conflict, the next world war could be over water because it's not just a shortage of actual drinking water. It's a shortage of clean water. You have water in Gaza. It's contaminated. It's undrinkable. Same thing in Africa. There is water to drink, but it's contaminated. And you could die from that. You could get E. coli, die from horrible diarrhea, not to TMI. More people are getting sick from these PFAS, which are known as the forever chemicals. That is not just a Flint problem, but that's having real issues for reproductive issues, miscarriages, issues at birth with children with deformities because of PFAS, cancers. So basically, Wall Street is betting on our fucked up system. Private companies, and Aaron Bakovich has been screaming about this for 30 years, are buying up a lot of water. By the way, when you see ads this election about the historic infrastructure deal, look underneath the hood. The infrastructure deal was a big privatization scheme. Yeah, they're building roads, but a lot of the infrastructure deal was selling off public systems, water systems, wastewater, other public assets to private companies. I mean, Josh Shapiro, when they were, kind of dangling him for a potential VP spot, it wasn't mentioned in the corporate media that there is a Dimmick, I think it is, in Pennsylvania, a city without clean water, that he has not followed through on his promises to help them. I was down in coal country, West Virginia. They're getting green water with algae coming out. And that's the coal baron governor of West Virginia, Jim Justice, and Joe Manchin have done nothing about it. So there is so many hot spots around America with water contamination. It's not all lead. And by the way, you could replace every lead pipe today, and that would not completely fix it because we have an EPA, but we don't actually have an EPA with teeth. We have Wall Street regulators. They're not allowed to fully regulate. If corporations are going to be indefinitely allowed to dump their shit everywhere and anywhere, and that shit either directly goes into our drinking water sources or indirectly, lakes, reservoirs, ponds, rivers, it's going to come to you.